the person you were with, there were times whenever they were great. They were good fun. They got you nice presents and things. They laughed at your jokes. They were funny, playful. There can be a lot of confusion because that version of them is the version of them that you fell for. The other version of them that was self-absorbed, selfish, that was devaluing, that was overly critical, that was domineering. Again, it's like this Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing going on with them. So there can be a lot of emotional confusion as to why you might still have feelings or some kind of thought process going on for someone who treated you so badly. One of the reasons for that can be because of those things, because of those good things. They may well have had genuine qualities that are nice, that are attractive. They could have a great sense of humor. They could have been very intelligent. They could have been really good looking. There could have been a lot of different things going on. And it's hard to reconcile that with the monster. It's hard to reconcile that with the horrible person. It's hard to reconcile that, the person who was generous and got you a really nice birthday present or something, with the person who was very, very selfish, took everything from you, gave little to nothing back in return. So there's an emotional confusion going on. And that can lead to the things like the rumination. Another thing that can happen, another reason why we find it difficult to move on, can be our own self-doubt. If you were with someone who was continually rewriting your narrative, maybe telling you what you think, telling you what your motives are, telling you your reasons for whatever, talking to you as if they know you better than you know yourself, that can lead to self-doubt. It might have been someone who criticized every decision you made, every action that you took. It could have been someone who insisted that you don't make any decisions without checking with them first because they know better than you. It could have been something like that. So again, there can be a lot of self-doubt. Your self-confidence, your self-esteem has been eroded over time. And when that happens, sometimes you can find it hard to trust your own perceptions of things. Second guessing yourself, catastrophizing thought patterns, things like that, assuming that things aren't going to work. With that self-doubt, there's another part of it. There's an emotional part of it. You might even question the validity of your own experiences. You might question the validity of your own feelings. There can also be, one of the reasons why we find it hard to move on, is the question, why? Why would they do this? Why would they reject that? Why would they behave like this? Why would they say something like that? Now, I'm not saying they're not valid questions, because they are, but the question why can sometimes lead us down a lot of rabbit holes. The only person who can ever answer that truly is them. Chances are they're not going to. If you ask them, why were you mean to me for so long, even if I was being good to you, nice to you, why were you being so mean? They'll look at you, confused. What do you mean mean? Sure, didn't I make you coffee once? As if that's going to undo everything. The why question can be very powerful. It can be very powerful. Again, we don't like things that don't make sense. Narcissistic behavior often defies logic and reason. Arguments are nonsensical. It's illogical logic. They just go round in circles, saying the same thing. Sometimes what you might find is, if you're having a discussion, you say one thing and they will say the complete opposite, even though you know they don't believe it. It's not that they're steel-manning you or something, they're just being disagreeable. Within 2 minutes, what you find is that argument is now round in a circle and they are arguing for the very thing you said in the first place. And you're that confused, you might find yourself arguing against yourself. So there's a lot of it is just, it defies logic, it defies reason. Why would they refuse or reject something that they might actually like, that they might find useful, that they might benefit from? Why would they reject something that they've actually been asking for? Once you go to give it to them, they tell you no. This can drive you insane. And what we want is to try to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. Something I often say is, even after the end of the relationship, it doesn't matter whether it's 6 months or 6 years, there is part of us might be wondering, have they changed? Well, if you were to give yourself 5 minutes in their company, you would soon find out. Okay? Something I often say to people is, if they would not change, while you were together. Why would you possibly think they're going to change now that you're not together, now that you're apart? But again, that part of us, that emotional confusion, that trauma bond, all the rest of it, is still maybe hoping for something. If you do find yourself, you're out of that situation, you are trying to move forward, trying to move on in life, but you do find it hard, you are still struggling, I think you should allow yourself a bit of compassion and a bit of patience. Some things that you might find helpful with that is to first of all recognize, reframing that narrative, if you will. You're asking, why would they do this? Why would they do that? If you're asking yourself questions like, why did I stay? Why did I not see the red flags? Why this? Why that? Again, maybe start asking yourself different questions. Questions like, how was I able to stay? Not why did I stay or whatever. How was I able to? How did I manage it? Now, it might have hurt, it might have been through a lot of hell with a lot of these people, the way they behave, but there was something in you that kept you functioning. You might have been functioning badly on some days and in some situations, but you were able to get up, get dressed, go to work, things like that. So you're asking, how was I able to do that? Because again, what you're going to do is you're going to tap into the sense of being a bit more resilient than you give yourself credit for. Okay, a bit more confident than you give yourself credit for. Instead of asking, why would they do this? Why did they behave like that? Again, ask different questions. How did they behave? When did they behave like that? Where were they behaving like that? You're asking different questions about the same thing. And what you might notice are different patterns. For instance, where did they behave like that? Well, they only behaved like that at home when there was no one around. It's just us. How did they behave like that? Well, they would have been condescending. They would have been rude, but they would have pretended it was a joke. So we're looking at unkind, cruel humor here. When did it happen? It happened any time I displayed any kind of pleasure in something or any kind of distress in something. If I showed any kind of emotion, that's when it would happen. Or if I asserted myself somehow, that's when it would happen. So you're asking different questions to help to reframe things. You're not asking the why all the time. You're asking different questions. How, when, where, and things like that.